The bright side of addiction is recovery. And as we know, recovery is an American way of life. Now, in this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we're going to meet a man who has been walking the walk for some 32 years. It hasn't all been easy, but it sure as hell has been rich and rewarding. I'm going to introduce you to George Comisky, who I had the pleasure of spending some time with during my recent trip to Texas. He will talk about the who, the what, the where, when, and why of his recovery adventure, and will offer some hope for those who are still struggling. And he'll talk about the growing community of collegiate recovery in which he is deeply involved. Now here's a preview audio clip. I asked George about what recovery means to him today, decades after emerging from the devastation of active addiction.
It really is a time of just being in and exploring what the possibilities of life are and how to be present to people when they struggle, and knowing that I don't have to run today.
My complete conversation with George will be coming up in just a couple of minutes. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast, and as you know, following 15 years of nightly broadcasts on iHeartRadio here in Seattle, we now have upgraded to a national podcast, which is available to anyone at any time, featuring interviews with clinicians and authors, recovering celebrities, newsmakers, and everyday people in recovery, plus well-vetted resources for individuals and families and friends of people suffering from addiction. We invite you to enjoy it and to share it with your friends as well. Recovery is an American way of life. Now, we would love to hear from you, by the way, so we encourage you to drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net and let us know your thoughts about our podcast. Perhaps you have a subject or a guest that you would like to suggest. Again, recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. You know, Recovery Coast to Coast is supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of the oldest and most successful treatment and affordable addiction treatment centers in the country. They have successfully treated well over 200,000 adults, adolescents, and families for the past 50-plus years. It's where recovery becomes a reality. Now, someone recently wrote to me and asked about mental health issues, and oftentimes alcohol or other drugs are not the only problem. There are, in some cases, co-occurring mental health issues. The Sundown staff is professionally trained, and they're able to treat cases involving dual diagnosis. And by the way, Sundown M Ranch is not a treat and release program. Some treatment centers will treat the patients while they're there, then release them and just kind of let them go. More interested in filling the bed with a new patient than caring for the recently treated patient. Sundown M Ranch has one of the most robust alumni programs in the country. Once a patient leaves the inpatient program, well, they're hooked up with a 12-step contact and a Sundown alumni member near where they live. You see, it's a community of recovery. It's really an extended family. And the Sundown facility, located on 30 acres, which as a not-for-profit organization they own, exudes serenity. It's located right at the entrance to the gorgeous Yakima River Canyon. Check them out, sundown.org. You can follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. A little later in the podcast, we're going to hear from legendary actress Julie Harris, who will share some encouraging thoughts about recovery. But right now, it's George time. An interview that I did with George Comisky while I was down in San Antonio. He's a pretty amazing guy who is on the front lines of the recovery movement. Welcome back once again to Recovery Coast to Coast, America's voice for recovery. It's great to have you with us. We are down here in the great state of Texas. Boy, there's so much going on in terms of recovery and organizations and young people in recovery and conferences. This conference is one of the highlights for me every year. It's the TAP conference, Texas Association of Addiction Professionals, and I have the opportunity to run into old friends. I've been coming down here now, I guess, about 8 or 9 years, and I am just blessed to be the master of ceremonies for the conference. And in between the sessions, I do some interviews. One of the people that I met here a few years ago was a guy named Tom McGovern. He's what I call one of the leaders and legends in this field. We've had him on before in Recovery Coast to Coast, and the guy that he said I needed to speak with when I came down to Texas was George Comisky from Texas Tech. By golly, he said, whatever Tom says, I got to do it. George, welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast.
Hey, thanks, Neil. It's great to be here and great to have Tom McGovern put us together. So.
And you know, it's often at conferences, people are coming and going and they're attending sessions, and I'm not available or they're not available. And I've run into George several times, and he said, I want to do it. I want to do it. So yesterday he said, what's your schedule tomorrow? I said, well, I get here at 7 a.m. He says, I'll be here. And sure enough, 7 o'clock, here we are.
Here we are.
Not many people around yet, but here we are. George, you've been in recovery for 32 years. You've been in the field for 30 years. What's recovery like for you today?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, it is just opening up so much every day. You know, I get the opportunity to still sponsor. I get to be sponsored. I get to meet with guys like Tom McGovern, once a week and sit down and just, it is just opening up life and not, like you and I talked about pre the interview, it's not easy.
Yeah,
There's still life going on. I've got children that, are emerging adults that are struggling and
stuff happens.
Stuff happens.
I cleaned that up. By the way.
Yeah, you did. And I appreciate that. It really is a time of just being in and exploring what the possibilities of life are and how to be present to people when they struggle and knowing that I don't have to run today. The things that what I use my addiction to do, recovery has opened me up to the possibilities of staying present to it today, and it's just been such a gift.
Addiction shut your ass down.
Totally.
Tell me about it.
I don't know a time when I wasn't shut down. That's the crazy thing. I grew up in a very loving home, but a very dysfunctional home, and a lot of pain. I don't know if I can capsulize it in the time that you and I have, just the pain that my family went through, but there was so much, a mother that just never felt like she was enough, and so tried to do that through having kids, and she was always pregnant and lost a few children in there, and just really struggled with feeling like she was enough, and suffered from some bipolar mental illness that just came out in rage. And so all of us just, I'm one of 11 kids.
11 kids.
11 kids.
Catholic family?
Oh, yeah. Just a good old Irish German Catholic family, right? And everybody just kind of went off into their silos, and even today, my siblings don't come back together in a healed way.
That's sad.
Yeah. And many times I've had conversations in the driveway at my parents' home with a sibling, one or the other, and they would say things like, you need to fix this. And I said, just because I'm in recovery and my life has gotten better, I can't fix other people, right? I can just love them where they're at and just be there with them. But thankfully, my mother died at peace, and I was able to make peace with her. I was able to make peace with my dad, and I think that's the gift of recovery.
Yeah,
they were able to come down to Lubbock. I grew up in the upper Midwest. They were able to come down to where I am today, watch me do my thing. They didn't understand it, but they were so grateful for it. And I'm grateful for that. That's the thing that recovery gives us. It gives us the opportunity to repair things if they can be repaired, and they can't always be.
What was the last year like of your addiction, and what led you into recovery?
So I had such a crazy, to be able to get launched out of my family, I kind of...
That's a great term, launched out of your family.
I had to find something because my dad was like, he filled out one of the FAFSAs, what we call FAFSA today, for my oldest daughter, or for his oldest daughter, my oldest sister, and it didn't work. And he was independent businessman, and he was like, I'm never filling out one of those again. So he didn't
filled out a what?
Kind of the to get you federal grants, Pell grants, money, to go to school. And he was like, I am never filling out one of those again. You're on your own, all of you. So everybody was on their own to pay for college, to get themselves into college. So I went to a local college for 1 year, deep into my addiction, failed out. And so the next thing I came on was a friend of mine who I'd done some theater with at one point. And he goes, man, there's this college out south of town that is paying people to go to college. If all you have to do is come out and audition, and they need guys. So I went out there, and I got a 4-year ride.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that took me into a master's in theater, right? And so now I'm like, I'm an actor. Which all good addicts are, right?
Of course they are.
I'm just in my
Academy Award-winning actors.
I'm in my element. That's right. And every night out at the bars, right, doing the deal, and I'm riding that train as far as it goes, and it ends me up in L.A. and I'm out of money, I'm out of resources. So I come back to the one place I know. I've got an uncle that lives in Lubbock. I moved back there. I teach, he sets me up in a job to teach, and the bottom comes out of it. I'm doing all the wrong things, all the things that are going to get me fired, and I get fired. I'm jobless, homeless. I have nowhere to go. And the last words from my uncle are, there's a guy that's over on the Health Science Center campus. His name's Tom McGovern. Go see him. I had no clue what recovery was. I had never heard of 12 steps, AA, any of it. And he introduces me to Carl Anderson. Carl Anderson introduces me to the Center of Recovery. Says, hey, we got an 18-hour program that you could become a licensed chemical dependency counselor. I start taking classes. I start going to meetings.
Did you go through treatment?
I didn't.
No, right into the rooms.
Right into the rooms. And
tell me about that first meeting.
Oh my gosh. There's a little old church. It's no longer there, but it was this inner city church, probably maybe hold 100 people. It was converted into an AA club. The church facility of it was a young people's club. They call it Billy's Place, and the young people could come hang out there. And then the old kind of meeting rooms of the church were where AA and Al-Anon and the smokers. You had a smokers room and a non-smokers room,
of course.
And so and there was one room that was kind of a mauve colored that we said was the Hand of God room. And Saturday mornings, 11 o'clock, I would be sitting in that room, and it would be 3 people deep. There'd be people sitting in chairs, people sitting in front of them, people sitting in front of them. And I would sit in that room, Neil, and it was just so powerful to hear people share at such a deep level. And that was not the family I grew up in, right? Here's new family. Here's people that love each other and accept each other. And we're all, there's lawyers and doctors. There's people that have jobs, all ends of the spectrum, sitting in a room together, getting honest, opening up, talking about the stuff.
What did that do for you?
First thing it did for me was just blew me away. I couldn't talk.
Did it scare you?
Unbelievably. And then to be hugged afterwards, to sit there and just, cry because you're in this place where that something's happening here that's so much bigger than me that I have no clue how to get involved with yet. I don't have the tools to do that. But people kept loving me and kept saying, come back.
And you saw people with the tools, and you wanted what they had.
Oh, that is exactly what I wanted. And the guys that were there, let's go out and get lunch. And that's where the change happened. That meeting after the meeting that takes you out, that introduces you and says, do you have a sponsor? Hey, I'll be your sponsor. Let's start working together.
Time to get real.
Let's get into this deal. Yeah. And that happened right off the bat.
Wow.
Took me right where I needed to be.
What was that first year in recovery like for you?
Well, so I needed to find a place to live. I needed to find a job. I was going to school. The little details that, make a life happen. And people stepped up and said, hey, I heard about an opening, in a place to live over here. I found there's a job over here. And I was just guided. I was on a bicycle. And I was guided to the things I needed to do to get to where I needed to be. And it wasn't another year or two probably before, things started to come together in a way that I thought, okay, I can make a life of this. And I had a job at a temporary place. I was a salesman for a temporary place. So I get to go to all these different businesses all around town. And I would stop every day at the Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse.
Really?
Yeah, because I knew the people there, right? I got met them in the rooms, and one day I stop in, and the prevention person says, "You got a resume?" And I said, "No." She says, "Well, I'm leaving. My husband just got a job down in Houston." She said, "If you can get us a resume, you can probably get a job here because you got your hours, right?"
God incidents.
Just boom, right? It's right there, just the opportunity. And that took me to then working with the school district. One day I'm doing a presentation in one of the schools, because that was the Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse had a contract with the schools to go in and do prevention. I'm doing a prevention. This guy steps in the back of the room with a tie on. I'm like, oh gosh, who's this? What do they want? They want to check up on what I'm saying, what I'm doing. At the end of the presentation, walks up, hands me his card. They had just gotten the Safe and Drug-Free Schools money. He said, we need a lead teacher. We need somebody to come in and start running some 12-step groups and start doing some things in the school. And so that's what I did for the next 12, 13 years.
My goodness.
Yeah.
And now you've been professionally in the field for 30 years. What are you doing now?
So now I'm at Texas Tech University. Mm-hmm. We have a collegiate recovery community. The place that we call home is called the Center for Collegiate Recovery Communities. And we are the replication home for collegiate recovery. What does it look like to bring young people in recovery onto one of the most unfriendly environments for someone in recovery, a college campus? Mm-hmm. And how do we support them in gaining, staying in recovery, because that's the number one thing, right? Yeah. Then getting an education, and then being of service, right? Taking that recovery and bringing it to the campus and letting people fully realize what that looks like in their life. And then, reaching out to others, working with the homeless, doing, awareness and education, having fun in recovery, showing people that there's a different way to be sober and in recovery and live life.
And help with what I like to call recovery enhancement.
Right.
I mean, we use the term, and people who listen to the show who have been listening for years know that this is one of my bandbox themes. I don't use the word relapse prevention. Relapse is a negative word. I understand it's a relapsing disease, but when instead of using relapse prevention, talk about recovery enhancement. Turn it around. How is your recovery today better than it was yesterday? Yeah. How can you improve your recovery tomorrow? It's progressive. Addiction is progressive in a negative sense. Recovery should be progressive in a positive sense. That's right. And the kinds of things you're talking about exemplify recovery enhancement, making it better, and clearing the way and opening up the windows, opening up the doors, opening up the hearts.
Yeah. Everyone that steps into the collegiate recovery environment has an opportunity to better themselves and take other people along with them. It's just such a
and there's the collegiate programs that I've been around, and the high school programs that I've been around, are filled with so much energy. It's overwhelming.
It is. Yeah. If you don't have that kind of energy with them, you're going to get swept up, because they're going to take you with you.
Absolutely are. 100%. Well, George, you amazing career, and of course it would not have happened without recovery.
It's true.
That is the bottom line, and I see it in your face. I see it in your smile. I see it in your character. You are the bright side of addiction. You are recovery. And by golly, I thank you for coming down here at 7 a.m. and sharing your story.
Neil, thank you for what you do. I'm so glad that Tom put us together. And, I just wish that all your listeners get the feeling that I get from you, which is that of gratitude, that of recovery enhancement, taking it to that next level.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I'm Neil Scott. The program is Recovery Coast to Coast. We will continue on Recovery Coast to Coast with some encouraging words to think about from the legendary actress Julie Harris. And we'll do that in just 30 seconds.
Are you afraid? Afraid of life without drugs and alcohol? There is help and hope at Sundown M Ranch. At Sundown, the focus is on you and your disease. You will learn how to live without depending on drugs and alcohol. Sundown M Ranch is nationally recognized for effective and affordable alcohol and drug treatment programs. Reclaim your life. Replace your fears with hope. Go to www.sundown.org right now to learn more.
Julie Harris, an actress and a woman who is in long-term recovery, shares some insight into living in recovery.
A laugh is worth 100 groans in any market. Charles Lamb. Many of us, as we become honest with ourselves, can begin to see that we take most things in life too seriously. We view our jobs, our status, our possessions large and small, even life's little mishaps, with far more seriousness than they deserve. The heart of the matter, of course, is that we tend to take ourselves too seriously. While it's true that many things do require our serious attention, that doesn't mean we have to go about straight-faced and tight-lipped in all areas of our lives. When we are excessively concerned, we limit our ability to have fun, to be relaxed and happy, in short, to enjoy life. If we find ourselves taking everything too seriously, if we see that we're trying to manage things beyond our control, it's time to reorder our priorities, asking ourselves what's really important. Perhaps then we can remember that we have a choice to burden ourselves by viewing everything as serious and therefore probably negative, or to strive for a positive outlook with the goal of enjoying life a day at a time as it unfolds. Thought for today: lighten up.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the National Podcast Recovery Coast to Coast. If you've enjoyed the podcast, we would love to hear from you. If you'd like to help us out by expanding our podcast to others, that would be awesome. There are a few things that you can do to help us. First of all, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. Secondly, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. And perhaps you'd like to suggest a topic or a guest with a minimum of 1 year in continuous recovery. Someone who would like to carry the message by sharing a story of experience, strength, and hope. Third, feel free to write a review of our podcast and let us know what you like and what you don't like. And lastly, kindly tell one or two of your friends about the podcast. That really helps, person to person, especially on social media. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. And remember, if you know someone who is experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, there's a 24-hour national helpline that offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals are available as well. It's 1-800-622-HELP. And another shout-out to our sponsoring organization. They've been with us since the beginning, Sundown M Ranch, successfully treating individuals, including adolescents and their families, for well over 50 years. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.